Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Hidden in Plain Sight panel of the Alterity through Puppetry and Performing Objects Symposium. I am Jung-Min Song, one of the organizers of the symposium. Please bear in mind that this session will be recorded and edited versions of recordings will be distributed by the Ballard Institute and Museum of Puppetry. By participating in this session, you are agreeing to this recording and this distribution. Thank you for joining us, and I would like to hand over to this session's moderator, Dr. John Bell.
Thank you, Min. Thank you very much for all of your work and hosting. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Hidden in Plain Sight Early 20th Century African-American Practitioners session with two distinguished speakers. It's interesting to me that before lunch, at least in this part of the world, we were looking at mostly work in the Mediterranean area, and now we are moving to the United States. We're moving to a different situation of the history of racism and chattel slavery in the US. My name is John Bell. I want to thank Puppet Arts graduate student Alyssa Matthews for being the tech person for our event. Dr. Paulette Richards and our other panelist, Ben Fisler, also presented at our Living Objects African-American Puppetry Symposium in 2019. And I wanted to ask my colleague Emily to post, or whoever, Alyssa, to post the link to the essays from those events. Thank you very much. So people can download those if they want. Also, we are taking donations. If anyone inspired by these events would like to make a donation to the Ballard Institute, we're going to share that link. And finally, the Dramatic Arts Department at the University of Connecticut has two jobs that we're looking to fill. One in theater studies and human rights, and the other a department chair director of drama director of CRT. So I've asked my colleague Emily, and she has done so, to post these links. Please take a look, share these with people you might be interested. Contact us, contact me if you want me to contact anyone who would be interested. I wanted to introduce both our speakers right now, so maybe we could go to grid view. Dr. Paulette Richards is a puppet artist and independent researcher. She holds a PhD from in French civilization from the, excuse me, now I'm looking at whatever I'm looking at. Oh, now I'm going to gallery view. Okay. She holds a PhD in French civilization from the University of Virginia and is taught at Georgetown University and Georgia Tech. She survived a 10-month stint in Senegal as a 2013-14 Fulbright scholar without contracting any tropical diseases, but sometime during her service as an artist in residence at the Institut Français de Saint-Louis, the puppet bug bit her hard. Lucky for us. After returning to Atlanta, she became a docent in the Worlds of Puppetry Museum at the Center for Puppetry Arts. She co-curated Living Objects, African-American Puppetry, the exhibit that ran at UConn at the Ballard Institute from 2018 to 2019 with me as other co-curator, and also co-edited the anthology of essays from the Living Objects Symposium, whose link you all just saw. Her book, Object Performance in the Black Atlantic, is forthcoming from Routledge in 2022. And the title of Dr. Richards' presentation is Always Busy Somewhere, John W. Cooper Crafts, an Entrée for the Other. Ben Fisler, Professor Fisler, is the arts coordinator and an associate professor of theater at Harford Community College. His article, Black and Blackface in the Performing Object, Bullock, Chessé, Paris, the Jubilee Singers, and the Burdens of ... everything, was part of our Living Object Symposium 2 years ago, in a long time, and the resulting collection now online. Other publications of his appear in the Puppetry Yearbook, Theater Journal, Performance, Religion and Spirituality, and Research and Drama Education. Ben coordinates responses on behalf of KCACTF Region 2, reviews productions through the Mid-Atlantic for DC Metro Arts, acts professionally with companies such as Prince George's Shakespeare in the Parks and the Chesapeake Shakespeare Company, recently playing Sir Peter Teazle in The School for Scandal. And Ben's presentation will be Ralph Chessé and Forman Brown, When Carving the Other is Carving the Self. We look forward to both of these presentations and questions and responses from the audience. And so now, Paulette Richards, thank you for being here, Paulette.
Greetings, I just unmuted myself. It's a great pleasure to be here back at the Ballard. I think without further ado, if I can have my slides, I'll be ready to jump in and start my presentation. Yes, so I only have one picture, but it's, as John mentioned, the title of my presentation is Cooper Crafts in Entrée. This is ventriloquist John W. Cooper. I'm not sure if this dummy is Sammy, his longtime alter ego, or if so, it's one of the earlier versions of that puppet. So could I have the next slide, please? But this presentation developed from research in the John W. Cooper collection at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. And that was supported by a New York Public Library short-term fellowship and also by Heather Henson. So many thanks to her. Okay, so I can leave the slides for now and we'll come back to it at the end so I can show you my sources. On December 10th, 1933, the Knights of Magic held a testimonial dinner and entertainment in honor of Frank Ducrot and Jean Irving at Rosoff's, a restaurant with national reputation that had dining rooms available for special functions located at West 43rd Street in the heart of Times Square. Amidst the magicians assembled around the banquet table stood a lone Black man. He was not a waiter, but a guest. In the Jim Crow North, dining in New York City before the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Zhu Qin notes that though they seldom refused Blacks service outright, white restaurants discouraged the patronage of Black diners in a multitude of ways, including seating in undesirable locations, slow service, adulterated food, and inflated bills. John W. Cooper's motto, however, was, "There's nothing in this world for a minute where the Black man is not in it." Thus, he appears third from the end on the right-hand side in a photo commemorating the occasion. Born around 1871 to parents who had been enslaved, Cooper was forced to leave school and fend for himself by age 13. He nevertheless mastered the language and visual signifiers of genteel society and deployed them as a means of resisting stereotypical representations of Blackness and accessing social networks that were normally off limits to Blacks in the Jim Crow era. This study explores Cooper's strategies of self-representation by examining his carte de visite, handbills, correspondence, and studio portraits, along with the language he used to describe himself. Cooper's success in getting audiences to accept the agency of a Black figure enabled them to more readily recognize the humanity and agency of a Black man. So, bubbling over with songs and stories. As a youth, Cooper spent 4 years touring New England, Canada, and the Mid-Atlantic states with the Southern Jubilee Singers. During this time, he began developing his skills as a ventriloquist. Cooper subsequently joined Richards and Pringle's Georgia Minstrels, but never performed in blackface. His ventriloquist act appeared in the Olio, or variety section of the show. The White Rat Strike of 1901 gave him the opportunity to break into mainstream vaudeville, since theater managers were willing to hire Black performers in place of striking white acts. Cooper frequently billed himself as bubbling over with songs and stories, so it is not surprising that words became the cornerstone of his self-promotion strategies. After the 1901 assassination of President William McKinley, Cooper adopted the tagline, "A Negro is in it." A Black man named James Parker was the first to tackle the assassin. Evangelist Lena Doolin Mason commemorated Parker's bravery and loyalty to the nation in a poem, "A Negro in It," using the opportunity to exhort, "White man, stop lynching and burning this Black race, trying to thin it, for if you go to heaven or hell, you will find some Negroes in it." Mason's poem gave Cooper the self-assurance to assume the right to show up anywhere his talent took him. A June 1st, 1902 letter from the Daily and Weekly Mirror in Escanaba, Michigan, replies to Cooper saying they don't have any more papers of the date he requested. Cooper collected his notices in a scrapbook. He then used these blurbs from different papers around the country to create a press sheet that he would send along with his card or handbills when he wrote query letters. From the beginning, his promotional materials emphasized class and refinement, describing his act as strictly high class and refined in every particular, the cleanest and most wholesome program on earth, and sure to please everybody. After he married, Cooper developed a variety act with his wife, Etta Freeman, known as Chubby. A flyer with 3 photographs promoted the Great Coopers. One image shows Cooper with his dummy Sam. One shows a design he has made by tearing paper. And in the center, there's a photo with Cooper standing next to Chubby, who is seated at the piano. The copy extols the great Coopers, saying, "For pleasing, refined, and astonishing novelties, they cannot be equaled." Another flyer asserts that the great Coopers are offered as real artists. They amuse, entertain, and mystify, and elaborates on their skills. Mr. Cooper tells stories in dialect, tears beautiful designs from paper, and does freehand drawing. Not to hear Mr. Cooper and his mischievous boy Sam is to miss one of the greatest treats in the amusement world. He is an artist of natural talent and gained his high standing after years of success before the public. Mrs. Cooper, while blindfolded, will tell the numbers placed on the blackboard, the kind of watch you carry, also the exact time of the same, and many other wonderful feats. Unfortunately, Chubby passed away. Cooper remarried in 1928, and his new wife, Julia St. Bernard, stayed home with their daughter. I see a link there about not seeing any images. That's because I have not secured permission from the Schomburg to reproduce any images, so bear with me. Though a 1953 retrospective of Cooper's career published in Oracle terms him the polite ventriloquist. Though Cooper had used this title as early as 1925, when he was so listed in the program for a town hall Americanization night, his successors in the trade would break with Cooper's respectability politics. Richard Sandfield, who began performing with a figure named Willie in the late 1960s, gained notoriety by recording blue material on party records such as Nasty and Naughty. While he was careful to reassure audiences that his material was polite and refined, Cooper was not shy about touting his skills, styling himself the triple-voiced marvel, and claiming around 1909 to be the world's only colored ventriloquist. This claim was not strictly true, since Johnny Woods received notice for an act in which his dummy, Little Henry, became intoxicated and sang the blues on stage as early as 1910, and Frank Rogers' career was almost exactly contemporaneous with Cooper's, since he was actively performing with a figure named Rostas from 1901 to 1935. Cooper nevertheless considered himself to be the Black Napoleon of ventriloquism. The fact that he was only 5 feet tall made the moniker all the more apt. Cooper was also willing to put his money behind his mouth. by advertising in industry publications. In 1933, he took a quarter page in Who's Who in Entertainment. The copy describes his act as a mirth-provoking pair, John and his dummy Sam, a clever repartee portraying ventriloquism at its best. Grown-ups as well as children find this colored artist intensely amusing. Cooper is the only artist of color listed, so it is telling that he had the funds to pay the fee, was willing to invest in advertising to the people who used this publication to book acts, and was allowed to place an ad, although it was relegated to the bottom right corner of the back page. Cooper continued to apply superlatives to himself even as vaudeville faded away. He toured the country with the radio program Major Beau's Original Amateur Hour under the alias Hezekiah Jones, but still claimed to be New York City's greatest ventriloquist act in a variety show presented at the P&F Corbin Club annual banquet in 1941. During World War II, Cooper found work performing at veterans hospitals and also appearing in USO camp shows across the country. These gigs proved so lucrative that in 1944, his wife Julie persuaded him to purchase a duplex on Halsey Street in Brooklyn for $4,500, arguing that there was such a great demand for places to rent that they would be able to get good tenants to help them carry the note. Cooper's pocket diary records his paydays from the USO and the payments he made on the mortgage. By 1952, when he was featured on a program at the Sam Harris Knights of Pythias Lodge number 207 as a headliner of the Ed Sullivan Show, the orphaned youth who once worked as an exercise boy at Sheep's Bay Racetrack had certainly proved himself a conqueror. Always busy somewhere. Cooper was under the management of George W. Lattimore, a Brooklyn-based African-American attorney, best known as the manager of Will Marion Cook's Southern Syncopated Orchestra. Yet Cooper did not rely on Lattimore to ensure that he was always busy somewhere. Jim Crow segregation not only limited African Americans' access to jobs reserved for whites, it also hampered their ability to build the kind of social capital that yields information about and referrals for employment opportunities. Cooper circumvented these disadvantages with a number of strategies. First of all, he maintained membership in several professional organizations. In addition to the Knights of Magic, he was a member of the Colored Vaudeville Benevolent Association, which George Walker had founded to support colored performers who were excluded from joining the White Rats Actors Union. Nevertheless, Cooper was also a member of the White Rats Actors Union of America Colored Branch number 15. The CVBA encountered stiff opposition from white theater owners and producers. So by 1908, Walker had turned his attention to another organization known as the Frogs, which functioned more as a social club and charitable enterprise for African American professionals, including doctors and lawyers, along with actors. Cooper subsequently joined the Negro Actors Guild, founded in 1936, and became a life member of the International Brotherhood of Ventriloquists, which formed out of the International Brotherhood of Magicians in 1940. A second strategy that served Cooper well was his willingness to do benefit shows wherever he traveled. He would perform for churches, the YMCA, even insane asylums. In 1906, he solicited a letter attesting to the quality of his performance from the Pueblo, Colorado insane asylum. Cooper developed this strategy very early in his career. A May 31st, 1899 letter from the YMCA in Ontario, Canada, recommends him to any church or society which would like a refined entertainment. He secured similar letters of recommendation from the Denver YMCA and the pastor of the St. John AME Church in Pueblo, Colorado, 1906. These letters helped him get bookings in private parties and exclusive clubs. And Cooper did not wait to be invited. He would send queries to social clubs asking if they needed entertainers for their events. For example, a 1928 letter from a judge who was an officer of the Madison Club gives a clue of how Cooper secured engagements of this type. The letter responds to Cooper's query about performing for the club. A newspaper clipping about an event that a social club was holding for a prominent member provides another clue about how Cooper identified such opportunities. It is unclear whether he clipped the notice because he was already booked to perform on the program, or whether he was a regular reader of the society pages who would then angle to get himself on the program when he found out about such events. Either way, it is clear that he deliberately targeted this market. Indeed, Cooper appeared on programs in private social clubs of all stripes, Jewish, Catholic, elite WASPs, and also for colored society in Harlem. Cooper did not travel in Europe, but he performed for organizations representing a variety of different ethnic communities. He was on the program for the Concerts et Bals sous les auspices du Lafayette Friends Club Incorporated, le 21 April 1928. The program is printed in French, but Cooper is listed as number 5 out of 6 performers on the program and named famous American ventriloquist. In 1929, he appeared on the program for an event that is billed in Cyrillic letters, and likely for a Greek or Russian immigrant community. Once he got his foot in the door, Cooper was skilled at turning professional associations into personal friendships. His relationships with magicians were especially fruitful, opening his horizons to more cosmopolitan audiences. Founded in 1922, one aim of the International Brotherhood of Magicians was to promote harmony among those interested in magic. In 1932, Cooper performed for the 35th anniversary turkey dinner and entertainment given by the Bohnenviertel Association in Elizabeth, New Jersey. Bohnenviertel was originally a neighborhood in Stuttgart, so presumably this was a German-American organization. Max Thiel, the magician, took up the second half of the program. Thiel may have helped Cooper get this gig. Another case where connections with a magician likely helped Cooper book a job was the 1933 annual entertainment and dance hosted by the Holy Name Society of Our Lady of Refuge Church at 196th Street and Briggs Avenue. The program lists John Cooper and Sam in a novel offering. The act following Cooper was Jarrow, vaudeville's cleverest mystifier. By circumventing the rigid segregation imposed by the Jim Crow system, Cooper was able to induce whites to judge him by the content of his character rather than the color of his skin. Thus, in a warm missive dated 1938, Barry Gray of the Lansing Elks Lodge sent Cooper a joke to squeeze into his act, a bit between the professor and Sam. Yet the Elks, like many fraternal organizations of the day, were a segregated organization. In 1897, B.F. Howard and J. Riggs had sought to establish a chapter of the Benevolent and Protective Order of Elks in Cincinnati, Ohio, but were refused. Riggs, however, had obtained a copy of the BPOE ritual and determined that it had not been copyrighted, applied for and received the copyright himself. Riggs and Howard then used the ritual to establish the improved Benevolent and Protective Order of Elks of the World the following year. The BPOE did not open its membership to African Americans and other minorities until 1972, but Gray encouraged Cooper, writing, "You are indeed clever, and color should not interfere with real talent, and I don't think it will these days." Thank you. If I could have the sources, please. So there's the first slide. There's another slide. So just give people a second to snap that one. And then there's the second one.
Great. Thank you very much, Paulette. Thank you so much. Super interesting. I wanted to mention, and I didn't do it before, but Emily nicely posted a message about posting questions for all the attendees. please feel free to post questions in the chat column. I think we'll be able to gather them all together in the chat column and pose them to our panelists. Next, we have Ben Fisler's presentation, Ralph Chessé and Forman Brown, When Carving the Other is Carving the Self. Welcome, Ben.
And thank you very much. I am truly honored to be included in a program with so many esteemed figures in puppetry and academia. And thanks to John, Emily, Matthew, and Chongmin for allowing me to join this important event. I'll try to make my own humble contribution in 20 minutes or less. So the puppet by its nature is a figure of alterity. It exists as a dynamic exchange between human being and performing object. To Paul Persis, the Rise of Manipulating 2012, the performer enters a fictional world of the puppet as its own other. This creates ambiguities in performance and discloses the human being in relation to the object. The performer's identity invariably contributes to the object's identity in such mimetic acts as construction and performance, while Persis is specifically interested in performances where the puppet and the manipulator are both characters in the play. The creator of the puppet as builder, manipulator, voice, or a combination is revealed in any work of puppetry. So, what happens when the puppeteer's identity is a mask of its own, and the objects engage the puppeteer's ambiguous relationship to that identity? What additional ambiguities are created in performance when the puppeteer's own characters either contribute to the mask their creator wears or deviate from it, even challenging it directly? Who in these cases is the other? In cases of racial identity, which is passing, the puppet or the puppeteer? In cases of gender or sexual identity, who is in the closet, the maker, manipulator, or the performing object? My goal here is to explore the puppet as a disruptive figure of alterity in an ongoing effort to recuperate the identities of two notable American puppeteers, Forman Brown, one of the main figures in the Yale Puppeteers and the highly popular Turnabout Theater, and Ralph Chessé, the chief puppeteer for the wonderful world of Brother Buzz, the longest standing children's television program in San Francisco, which ran from 1952 to 1969, and the director of the WPA puppetry units in LA, Oakland, and San Francisco. Can we bring up slide 1, please? And there they are. I refer to an ongoing effort with good reason. Forman Brown is being recuperated due primarily to his contributions to LGBTQ literature through his novel, Better Angel. Can we have slide 2, please? This was published in 1933 under the pseudonym Richard Meeker, then republished multiple times, then republished most recently with a foreword by Forman Brown acknowledging himself as the author of the novel. Chessé's own son, Bruce, has been engaged in recuperating his family's identity for decades now. Can we have slide 1 again? And occasionally, I've had the opportunity to cross paths with him, thank you, Facebook, and get direct input on what he's uncovered about his father and their family lineage, which was historically mixed race and mixed race African-American and Caucasian American, but chose to identify as white for most of the 20th century. But who were these two puppeteers? Well, to hear them tell it, they were artists, creating work that had the potential to transform the public's view of the art form. Chessé with work that was as rich and serious as any high art theater, and Brown with shows that were like miniatures of the burgeoning musical comedies of the time. From Chessé's perspective, his position in the Federal Theater Project improved on puppetry in general. Quote, "It gave me a chance to show that marionettes can be a very high-class entertainment. We could go into the classics, which is something others hadn't done. They were still doing fairy tales for children. The variety shows I did were adult productions." Chessé conceived his work in kinship with Edward Gordon Craig. Quote, "I intended to make an instrument of the theater, a surrogate, which would serve my purpose as an actor," close quote. So enamored of his creations and his innovative techniques was Chessé that he celebrated the marionette as though it were a separate entity, as though he were Pygmalion and the object so beloved he gave it life, calling the puppet, quote, man's soul and man's conscience, who proclaims his virtues and attacks his vices, yet remains free of all contamination, close quote. Brown similarly appears to have been interested in the puppet as a substitute for the human actor, much in the tradition of Craig's Uber marionette. However, where other puppeteers have evoked Craig for the puppet to serve aesthetic purposes that live actors could not, Brown imagined the puppet as a performer very like the human actor. In his first history of the Yale Puppeteers, Punch's Progress, 1936, he described his puppets as beings with their own psychology. While presenting a throne room scene, one of the puppeteers tangled a prime minister marionette with its queen marionette. Brown describes the independent action on the puppet's part. Quote, the prime minister, quite regal in his way, in a sweeping gesture of prime ministerial elegance, caught the queen's right foot and pulled her gently but firmly from her throne. The show, however, despite this strange interlude of puppet psychology, a psychology, let me say, that no scientist has yet studied, was a success, close quote. Brown's view of the mishaps in performance as creating problems not for the human artists, but for the fictional characters themselves is part of an ongoing theme in his work. Brown embraces the alterity at the core of puppetry. His objects talk back to their creators or challenge them directly in performance. Further evidence of this embrace of alterity lies in the company's commitment to near photographically realistic portrait puppets of various famous persons. Slide 3, please. In the 1920s, the company produced marionettes of Benjamin Disraeli and Albert Einstein. So detailed were these images that both the statesman and the scientist actually posed for photographs with their puppet doppelgangers. So again, we see another angle of treating the puppet as independent being, a kind dealing with both aspects, both elements rather, of alterity, recognition. It's like me, says Einstein, but also otherness. That is Einstein, not my sculpture, says the artist. Please return to slide 1. Thank you. So I want to speculate on how their respective sexuality and ethnicity may have informed their work. Though having distinct meanings within the context of alterity and theory in general, race and sexuality are particularly analogous in these cases. Brown was a closeted gay man, including metaphors of sexual identity in his plays. Chessé was a man of mixed race who publicly identified as white, while often showcasing Black subjects. Brown was closeted in public while in a lifelong relationship with fellow puppeteer Richard Brandon. The Chessé family, listed historically as mulatto, chose to identify as white, an effort in which Chessé actively engaged, never acknowledging his own genetic connections to subjects he chose to represent, even reflecting in interviews of his depiction of Black subjects as interest in communities of either his youth or in his travels as a merchant marine, but never his own. Brown's life was code switching between public and private spheres. Chessé's was one of denial in both, aided by literal whitewashing in the 1924 census. So both artists engaged in distinct forms of what Michael Taussig calls responsivity, a process where mimesis yields into the other. Brown's Noah's Ark featured, Mr. Noah featured a male couple, two dodo birds whose inability to produce an offspring doomed their species. Chessé created paintings for the San Francisco Museum of Art and especially noted among puppeteers for his adaptation of The Emperor Jones. Both artists demonstrate alterity as an ambiguous concept that disrupts itself. The story, then, of how we get from a mixed-race Chessé family to white puppeteer Ralph to Bruce's efforts to recuperate the family lineage begins hundreds of years ago with the Louisiana Creole Chessés, who, as Bruce discovered, were listed as Black in 1900, mulatto in 1920, and white in 1924. As Bruce put it, even though he left behind 900 works of art, much of which represented Black subjects related to his upbringing, the family bloodline was rarely discussed and possibly never mentioned by Ralph. So I asked Bruce right out, do you think your father was cognizant of the family's lineage? And his response was even more telling than I had originally expected. To quote him, I'm quoting Bruce Chessé now, Ralph was in denial, but his father never told his 5 children that their great-grandmother was a Black slave born in Cuba. Ralph was terrified of being identified as Black. His denial, in contrast to what his paintings have to say about being Black, is an exercise in contradiction and demonstrates the innumerable conflicts that haunted him. Yeah, he was a very complex man whose art took precedence over everything in his life. That was where he could live sustainably, close quote. I love the use of the term, that was where he could live sustainably. Since his death, the LA Museum of Art and the California African American Museum both rejected exhibitions on the basis that Ralph Chessé didn't identify as an African American person. Yet at the same time, partly because he saw himself as a true artist, his Emperor Jones is a noted event in the history of puppet theater. Engaging with his high artistic principles, he created this sophisticated work of theater. He chose living African-American actor Charles Gilpin, who had won the NAACP Spingarn Medal for his performance in the play as a template for the object, incorporated a reading of the Congo, a folkloric poem by populist poet Vake Lindsay, and applied his usual meticulous artistic strokes to this short play. Can we jump to slide 4, please? I won't get into the details of the object or the dated nature of this play by white playwright Eugene O'Neill, which others addressed far better than I could in other places. Suffice to say that all you have to do is look at the image of Gilpin on the right and the image of the puppet on the left, and you can see right away the elements of exaggeration and exoticism in the carving and in the play that other the character. But for this presentation, I'm less concerned about the details of that, which I could probably talk for 20 minutes about by itself, than focusing on what Chessé was trying to do in creating this high art presentation, which, for better or worse, was one of the most sophisticated of the mainstream puppet theater to feature a Black character in the 1930s. So we have here a puppeteer who denies both publicly and privately to be an African-American or biracial artist, yet engages in high art representations of Black characters. Slide 5, please. In his other artworks, he focused several scenes in his mural for the Coit Tower WPA art project on characters identified as Black in both representation and title, and many of his other works either explicitly or implicitly represent Black figures, with even biblical subjects like David and Elijah portrayed as such. Now, I could talk for 20 minutes just about the 2 images we put up right now, the photograph of Ralph without his hat on the right and what appears to be a self-portrait. In this exchange, we have elements of concealment, passing, and reveal all mixed together in some beautifully messy and fascinating ways. Can we move to slide 2 again, please? With Brown, we have a puppeteer who is very much private about his identity as a gay man, yet his plays reveal it right and left to anyone cued into the code. Now, for me, the smoking gun is Mr. Noah, which I already mentioned. And the Dodo Bird song in that play, I'm a boy and I'm a boy, which includes the lyric, and we're nothing but friends. I really hope the 2 puppets turned to each other and did puppet double take when they said that. When they sang that, rather. The other plays may not be as definitive, but the code is there, as we will see in another one of his plays, Caesar Julius. In Mr. Noah, the puppets are ushered onto the ark, protesting, "Don't send us, sir, aboard your yacht, for we're not, for what you think we are, we're really not." Later on the boat, they introduce their song by saying, "We want to explain, it's difficult, you see, we're not really married. We can't be." So you almost get the impression, although that scene is not depicted, that the dodo birds were nesting together and Noah saw two doe birds nesting together, ushered them onto the ark before he realized they were both men. Later, the play touches on the project of passing on Ellis Island. They land on Ellis Island instead of Mount Ararat. And they're processed as anyone would have been through immigration. They take the oath to become citizens. They promise to abide by the Constitution, suspect the Jap, and mistrust the Russian. And they say, we'll even join the WCTU, the Christian Temperance Association. And the dodos are actually quite happy. We think, quote, we think we're going to like New York. We've no occasion to feel so blue. There's lots of other queer birds here too, close quote. Now in Caesar Julius, Aphasia, Caesar's wife, the actual wives of Caesar being Cornelia, Pompeia, and Calpurnia, but aphasia means communication problems caused by brain damage, believes that her husband is unfaithful, tracks him down at a bathhouse where she believes he is meeting up with Cleopatra, and instead finds him there with 3 male correspondents, one of whom is named Braun, B-R-O-U-N. She then apologizes for doubting him, affirming her own denial. All of this is mirrored in Brown's novel, Better Angel. The main character, Kurt, even has an exchange with his best friend, Chloe, when he tells her he's a gay man and he can't love her the way she loves him. She says, no, David and Derry are like that. You're not like that. They're surrounded by pretty boys and you're not like them. David and Derry are most likely the representations, Kurt being Forman Brown, Derry being Harry Burnett, and David, who Kurt ultimately finds true love with, being Richard Brandon, his lifetime love partner in work and life. Later, Kurt argues between the labels perverted and queer for who he is. And in a pivotal scene, hearkening right back to Mr. Noah, Kurt is sad that because of what he is, he can't ever have a child. So in conclusion, Forman was closeted, but not in denial. Can we go back to slide 1 just for the end? In conclusion, Forman was closeted, but not in denial. In fact, his life, like his novel, is a story of a gay life with a happy ending. Chessé appears to have been in some level of denial in private as well. And yet both artists created work that showcases the very identities they both denied. As a final thought, I'm going to personify a little myself by saying that as a figure of alterity, who, as Chessé tells it, is the artist's soul and conscience, the puppet takes upon itself the aspects of the artist that are otherwise concealed. It turns its head back to face its own creator, or its face outward to the world, whispering, I am what he will not say. Or singing out, I am what the world will not let him say. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Ben. That's very interesting. If folks want to post questions for Ben and Paulette, please feel free to do so. I have a few myself. One of the things that interests me about what you both said, and again, thinking of what how this differs from what was being discussed this morning, is for each of you a focus on the puppeteer and the character of the puppeteer and how the puppeteer performed, and to a certain degree the difference between the puppeteer and the puppet and what that offered. And I wanted to ask Paulette about the nature of Cooper's performances. I very much appreciate your attention to how he worked and presented himself and worked in and through institutions. I wondered what his vent act was like, and also, Paulette, in the morning we were looking at the grotesque, in some ways, nature of caricatures of others, and I'm not sure what you had. One image of Cooper's dummy, and your descriptions of his performance emphasize things like refined, and I wondered, did Cooper's performances with Sam, his dummy, which were so refined entertainment, or by the polite ventriloquist, do you think those exist or function sort of in conscious contrast to the exaggerated grotesqueness of minstrel images that were being used?
Yes, thank you for that question, John. This paper is an excerpt from a chapter in my book on Cooper, and the next section explores his performance in much more detail, because I'm looking at his relationship to blackface minstrelsy. So we can start with the name of his puppet itself, which originally was Sambo Johnson. And Sambo was one of the stock minstrel characters, usually portrayed as lazy and ignorant. But there was a push among African-American performers, Cooper being one of the earliest, to rehabilitate that name, Sambo, and transform the image of, the image associated with that character. So in that sense, although he used Sam very often as the dummy who knows more than one would imagine, so there would be dialogues where Cooper is playing a professor and Sam is being quizzed and giving, on the one hand, ignorant, nonsensical answers, but at the same time, the logic in his understanding of the questions enables him to ultimately outwit the professor himself. So the dummy who is smarter than he appears. Does that speak enough to your question about performance and what his relationship to the grotesque is? I can go on, but I don't want to take up too much time.
No, I guess it's a big subject. So there's a couple of the questions for you, Paulette, but maybe we could just for a moment turn to Ben. And Ben, a question I had for you, noting Nancy Staub's comment, whoops, which I just lost. Okay. Oh, I once heard the great marionettist Albrecht Roser say, when asked if he could play the violin, "I make a puppet that can do what I cannot do," kind of echoing what you were saying about Chessé and Brown.
Yep.
Was this the alterity of the characters that Chessé and Brown created and performed? I mean, maybe this is what you're saying and I'm just not understanding it well or reiterating it well, but is there something—
Well, I'm not explaining it well.
No, I think you were very clear. Is the function of the puppets in that sense, in both cases, sort of a helpful or ameliorative to the situations that they're struggling with? Is that what the puppets are actually doing?
I think that's true for both artists, but in different ways. Chessé would probably we keep coming back to this thing about Chessé's level of denial. I see a lot of places where Chessé circumvented the question of identity. He would have said he uses marionettes, and a lot of his carving principles were to make the head and the body proportional so that they could be taller. And Bruce often explains that as being only a couple inches above 5 feet. There were a lot of roles that he wouldn't have gotten to play as an actor, but with a marionette, he could present any role he wanted to. I really think that some of the work that we see by the Turnabout and by the Yale puppeteers really is Brown and Brandon revealing, speaking to the community that would only know these codes, that would only know today. If we saw a play that mentions there's lots of queer birds in New York City, we would know exactly what all of us would know what they were talking about. But I think the idea that in the 1930s you could have audience members who were in the closet, knowing what the playwright what the show really means, who the characters really are, and then the rest of the audience going queer, as in the odd birds, the dodos being the weird ones. So I think that is for one reason or another, the attraction by both of these artists to puppetry is to be able to do things or say things that they wouldn't be able to say as live actors or do as live actors.
Okay, thank you. We're going to stop also right at 2:15. So I wanted to turn to Paulette. There's two questions for Paulette, kind of related. Matthew Cohen asks, what did Cooper's paper tearing act involve, which I agree sounds fascinating. How was it related, if at all, to his vent act? And then Frank Proshkin asks if you could say more about stage magic as performing objects. Was Chubby, Cooper's wife, right, essentially a mentalist, or did she also do close-up magic?
Okay, so on the paper tearing, I guess kind of like a lightning sketch artist. Paper tearers on the vaudeville stage would make designs by tearing paper, kind of like the decorations that you see around Dia de los Muertos in Mexico. And so the image of Cooper is with a large thing that looks like a snowflake or a doily. And that's as much as I know about the paper tearing. As far as the magic, and the object performance part, the fascinating thing I'm discovering is that the magicians and the ventriloquists in vaudeville fell under the category of novelty. And by novelty, today we tend to think of just new. But in that time, novelty included technology. And so Cooper would bill himself as being able to imitate Edison's phonograph, or later the radio. His figures themselves were novelties because they were automata. They were mechanical. He controlled them remotely with a system of foot pedals under the barber chair. And so magicians also had different technological devices that they used to carry out their illusions. I don't think that he was using technological devices with Chubby, but they probably had a set of codes. So in his patter with the audience, she would be able to guess, from what he was telling her in coded language. So to that extent, I don't think she did any close magic.
Mm-hmm. Great. I'm looking at Toby Poster Sue's question to both of you. Toby writes, I'm interested in the fact that all of the three artists who inhabited various minoritized identities seemed to work hard to position their art as respectable. Given the anarchy and countercultural leanings we often find in puppetry, do you think there may be elements of privilege and comfort visible in the production of transgressive public art. Do you think there may be elements of privilege and comfort visible in the production of transgressive public arts? I don't know if either of you would like to respond first.
I can jump in because I think you said it better than I could have. I think I read that comment just a few seconds ago, and all I could think was, yes, that is absolutely the case. And I would even go so far as to say that both Chessé and Brown are using their respective passing in order to take advantage of certain elements of privilege. Brown, his upper middle, his white New England background, and he even presents that in his novel. He's got connections that allow him to, for example, bail his friend Derry out of jail very quietly and not let their love triangle come out in court because of the connections he has. And I think, as Bruce points out, we can look back on Ralph and say he was, very terrified of what might happen if the word got out about his family's lineage. But at the same time, that is an example of privilege. The fact that he looked the way he did and he and his family could, legally become white people in 1924 and completely, and even when you look at certain photographs of Chessé, you see him covering his hair. And it's just, it like I said, you said it better than I could have, but you see all these things wrapped together, this privilege and the way it's used to, okay, but yeah, it's all there. I agree.
We have like 2 minutes left. Paulette, I'm not sure I understand this question, but I'm sure you do. You think there may be elements of privilege and comfort visible in the production of transgressive puppet art in regard to John Cooper?
I think we got to flip that on its head, and that the transgression for Cooper is to insinuate himself into places where ostensibly he does not belong. And the anarchy of that, if you can imagine him doing his act in the Deep South, where the slightest slip up could get him lynched after the show, it puts transgression in a different context. And then I'm thinking a lot about Chessé, because I am going to write about him in my book. I have not had a chance yet to dig into the primary source material, but some of what I'm able to draw on in this research is lived experience. So what I discovered about the Elks is because the first time I encountered that in the archive, I was like, well, is this the colored Elks? Because my father was in the Elks band when he was in high school, or is this something else? And then I have to dig in and flesh that out. So the experience of passing, Chessé could successfully pass amongst most whites, but just like the example of Queer Birds, there were Black people who definitely knew that he was Black, whether they signaled that or not, because part of the code in those days was you didn't out people because it could get the whole community in trouble. I would like to think about Chessé inhabiting a non-binary in identity, because he came from a society where race was not a binary proposition, and then it was forced into a binary system. So naturally, you would choose the one that gives you the most opportunities.
Great. Okay, I'm pretending I'm moving on, and I'm going, wait a minute, I have to think about this. So thank you both, Ben and Paulette. We're going to end this session, and the next session begins at 2:30. Contemporary Legacies of Racial Violence, which Paulette is going to moderate. So, and as my colleague Emily Wicks wrote, if you have further questions for Ben or Paulette, please post them and ask them in the general discussion that's going to happen at 3:30. So thanks again, Paulette and Ben, for your great work, which is, I have to think about it a lot. Okay. And thanks everybody for watching. Thank you. We'll see everybody later.